Hi, I'm Claire Rose, and you are watching Influence Matters, sponsored and brought to you by Rosedale Publishing. Every week, I invite you to join me to come back and learn some more tips, tricks, tools, resources, secrets, hacks, whatever you'd like to call them, that will help you and people just like you who are savvy influence creators to strategically and intentionally cultivate your influence. Today, we're going to start right in with our question of the week. So this week's question comes from Emma Ryder. Emma says, when I'm ready to, I know I need to hire an editor, but how do I even know where to start writing my book? So first of all, Emma, I love your name. If that's really your name, what an awesome name for a writer, Emma Ryder. I should change my name, Clara Ryder. I like it. So Emma, first let's start by talking about, I love the fact that you're saying, yes, I know I need to hire an editor. Maybe you were here last week or maybe you the week before and you heard me harping on needing an editor. I don't know, but if not, I commend you on knowing that that's a step that you're going to have to go through at some point. But where do you even get started? Now, it can be as simple as finding someone to help you with it. Of course, that's a service that I offer, but there are other people out there that do that as well. So find somebody who knows what they're doing, right? Has some track record for success and has some sort of a plan for making it happen in a way that is duplicatable, right? So that you're using a system. There's no need to actually use somebody to do a book, your second book, if you've been through a good process the first time with somebody who knows what they're doing, other than the editing piece, of course. So I encourage you to find somebody for that. Now, if you don't want to do that and you want to DIY, do it yourself, I'm totally okay with that. I tend to be that kind of person myself sometimes. Getting started on a book is as simple as having a good plan in place. And of course, that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we move on, of course, I want to mention that if you'd like to have your question on the air and answered on the air, I'm happy to do that. Please send it to hello@clararose.com. Be sure to include how you'd like for me to talk about you. It can be anything from anonymous, if you don't want anyone to know your name, all the way to your full name, your business name, your contact information, whatever you'd like for us to show on air, we will do that for you. I also like to, at the same time, encourage you, please send us tips, tricks, tools, resources, whatever it is that you find helpful as an influence builder or writer that we might find interesting as well. I'd love to research those and share them with all of the savvy influence creators out there. Okay, Emma, you're in luck today because today the topic is 3 easy steps to writing your book. Now, it sounds oversimplified, but I promise you by the end of today, you're going to say, wow, there really is 3 easy steps to writing my book. So let's jump right in and get started. Step 1 is get started. You don't know how many people that I speak to on a weekly basis or monthly basis, but mostly weekly, who say, I have been working on my book for years, or I know I have a book inside me and someday I'm going to write that book. So it really is about making the decision to get started. That is where hiring someone to help you really comes in handy because they're going to hold your feet to the fire and help you to move forward in the process. It's easy to think, I need to write a book. I know I need to write a book. I know it's going to be a good tool for me, but I don't know what to do, so I'm not even going to start. So getting started is absolutely step 1. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to analyze. What do you want your book to do? Stop and think about that for a second. It's not just, oh, I want to write a book. I think I need to write a book. Or someone said, you need to write a book. Whatever it is, you need to stop and say, what am I going to do with this book once I've created it? What value is it going to bring to my life or my business or my ministry or my cause or my career? What are you going to do with it? It's not just about writing a book. It's about creating a tool that does something for you. Now, because I work specifically in nonfiction, This is super true for all of my authors. Now, if you're working in fiction or your desire is to write fiction, it's a little different story. Now, there's still some underlying reasons probably why you want to write your book. It's probably not going to be the same as those who are writing a nonfiction book that they're going to use as a tool to accomplish something. So just get really clear on what it is you'd like to accomplish and what this book will actually do for you. So the more you're connected you are with why you're doing it, the more stick to it you're going to have when the times get tough, because writing a book is tough. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes commitment, and most of all, it takes what I like to call butts in seats, right? You actually have to sit down and write. So if you don't have a good, strong reason for it when it gets tough, when the going gets tough, then you're not going to do it. So for most of us, when we wrote our first book, including me, I was working full time. So I had to write when I could write. And that's probably true for you, right? You have a business or a ministry or a cause or something that consumes your time. You have a family, you have church life, you have networking, whatever it is that consumes your time. And writing your book is going to be squeezed into the margins of life. Maybe you're staying up late to write. Maybe you're getting up early to write. I don't know why anyone would, because that's crazy talk, right? But they're getting up early anyway. Wherever you're squeezing it into margins of your life, when other things come up, it's going to be super easy to not sit down and write if you're not really connected to why am I doing this to start with, right? Get a good picture of that end in mind, what I'm going to do with this tool before you get started. I promise you it's going to make a huge difference. It's that simple. There you have it. That was step one. Of course, I have a savvy tweet for you. If you hop on over to Twitter, you can always find me at Clara Rose Chat. A book is a tool. Decide what that tool will do for you before you start to write it. Start with the end in mind. Now, of course, I'm not the one to coin that phrase, start with the end in mind, but I preach it all the time to my authors and potential authors. Start with the end in mind. Know what it is you'd like to say. Know what it is you want to happen because or as a result of the book. Know what tool it is that you're trying to create, what you're going to do with it when it becomes an actual tool, when you have it in your hot little hand. Super exciting when you first get your book, but so much more important to have an idea of what you're going to do with the book before you ever get started. Okay, step 2. Super simple, brainstorm your concept. So what is brainstorm your concept? What do I mean by that? You're going to need to spend some time figuring out what the concept or the idea around your book is. And what is brainstorming? Brainstorming is just getting all of that stuff out of your head onto paper somewhere else where you can work with it, right? You can carry stuff around in your head and it sounds great in your head, right? First I'm going to write this, and then I'm going to write this, and then I'm going to write this, and it all sounds lovely. But until you get all of those ideas out where you can see them, you're not going to know how they fit together overall. So you may have experienced this, I know I have, where I've picked up a book to read it, and they're like all over the place, right? It's like, okay, we were talking about this, and now we're talking about this. I'm not sure how they're related, why this piece is in there. It just doesn't make sense. And those are the kinds of books that you toss aside and you never finish because you didn't pull the writer didn't pull the reader along in a way that made sense to them. So our goal in writing our book is to have everything out of our head onto paper where we can manipulate it and move it around. So with my authors, we do this. We use poster board. You could use a wall. You could use a whiteboard. Some people will do it digitally on a computer. We use sticky notes, right? It's like, okay, this color sticky notes, and I like coordinating pins, but I'm weird that way. You don't have to do that. This color sticky note, maybe the hot pink, these are my main topics for each of my chapters. And then the yellow ones, maybe those are going to be my subtopics. Those are topics or ideas that support the primary topics. Make sense? And then we're going to have even one more color of sticky notes, and that's going to be the pieces that hold it all together. So think about a brick wall. You don't have to be a builder to envision this. We have the big bricks or blocks. I think the bricks are the little ones, the blocks are the big ones. Let's go with bricks. The little bricks. And then we have pieces, right? So we have the full ones, and then we have the pieces. So that's what I'm talking about. The full ones, those are your main topics. The pieces, those are your subtopics or supporting topics. And then you have the mortar. That's the sticky stuff that holds it all together. It's the glue, right? That makes that into a wall. So you have the big pieces, the little pieces, and the glue. So think of your book in the same way. We have main topics, we have subtopics to support them, and we have glue in each of those chapters. So what is the glue? Glue is those stories or anecdotes or whatever those pieces are that make it feel relational. Story is super important as you pull your book together so that it's not just dry facts that people don't care about. And we need the stories to make it cohesive and to make us want to read it. Think about your favorite book. I'm going to say nonfiction book because fiction's different. Think about your favorite book. Does that writer use story to capture your attention? I'd be willing to bet yes. Story is what pulls us through from one chapter to the next chapter. It also takes a topic or a subtopic, a main point, and makes us care about it. It makes it important somehow. So those are the three pieces that you're going to need to brainstorm. So that's why I use sticky notes and a wall or poster paper, because I want to be able to get my topics up there, get my subtopics up there, and then the stories that support each of those, or the anecdotes, or whatever you want to use to support each of those chapters. Now you can look at it overall and say, okay, if I start with this topic, it makes sense to move to this topic, and then to this topic, and then to this topic, so that when you're done, you have a storyboard, if you will, that shows each of the chapters in the sequential order that you're going to write them. Now, we haven't started writing a thing yet, right? We're just getting it out of our brain, dumping it onto paper where we can work with it, or dumping it onto sticky notes, or however you're going to do it. If you're going to do it on the computer, I think it's less effective. There's something proven, scientifically proven, about writing things out. Now, if you're like me, if I make a mistake, I need to throw it away and get a new sticky note. So that's one of the reasons for sticky notes. But my primary reason for sticky notes, and why I use it with my authors, is it's mobile. I can move them around and say, okay, this sticky note, this chapter, this topic makes more sense over here. Or this topic, I think this topic and this topic are so similar that they really are one chapter. That's really one topic, and I can pull it together. So before we've written a word, we have completely mapped out how it's going to work, right? So brainstorming is about dumping it out of your head onto something where we can actually do something with it. So brainstorming, the brain dumping of your content, ideas, out of your head and onto paper. So I got a little bit ahead of myself talking about the next step, but I wanted you to understand the connection between getting it out of your head. So this happens almost every time I start with a new author. When we start with the brainstorming blueprint for their book, this almost always happens. We start to pull it together, and then they go, oh, wait a minute, I haven't talked about this. Oh, wait a minute, I haven't talked about that. That's why the brainstorming is such an important piece. That's where we pull all those pieces together, and as you see them, it's going to trigger you to think of another thing. Oh, you know what? Ooh, I have a good story for that. So it's a process. And when we're done with that process, that brainstorming process, it doesn't mean that you can't add more things to it later on, because you totally can. What it means is that you've put enough time and effort into pulling all those things out that probably all of your content is there. If later on you come up with something else, then you have a place to go back and look. Where does this fit? Where does this make sense? It's also a good place to find out, I have all of this to say. Is this really one book? Is this 2 books? Is this a series of books? Sometimes you go in knowing, I'm going to write a series, and that's a much bigger project, so you definitely want help for that one, I promise you. But then it's about looking at the content for the entire series and separating them out in a way that's going to make sense, that you can write about them. Of course, I have a savvy tweet for you. If you want to hop on over and see me at Clara Rose Chat. Brainstorming your book is about getting all of those ideas out of your head and onto paper where you can actually work with them. Okay, step number 3, blueprint your content. Now, you may have figured this out. Brainstorm and blueprint is exactly what I'm talking about. Analyzing in the beginning, of course, is a piece of brainstorming and blueprint, and it's definitely a course that I offer as well. Brainstorm, we've done. Got it all out of our head, and now we're going to blueprint. Now we've already started talking about it when we talked about the poster paper, poster board, or the wall, where you can start to move things around. The blueprint is like, well, and I'm using the building analogy again. It's like a blueprint for a building. When you look at the blueprint, if you know what you're looking at anyway, you have an idea of what the finished product's going to look like. Usually they'll have a rendering so that you see what the project is going to look like. And of course, we're going to have the same thing because in the process, we're going to create that cover. That cover, which is a promise of what they're going to find inside your book. Oftentimes when we're brainstorming, we'll discover what our titles are going to be. We'll also come up with ideas of what our cover is going to look like, because it's just a promise of what you're going to find inside the book, and we're already brainstorming, right? All these pieces are coming together. And as we start to name our different chapters in the blueprint process, we're giving some structure to how the book is going to be built. So that's why I call it a blueprint. Some people that you work with might call it a book build. Kind of an industry term, jargon is a book build. I like to use the term blueprint because I think it's more definitive. It defines all of the pieces and the fact that it's going to show you where to go from start to finish. Your blueprint is actually going to be a guide to help you get from point A to point B, right? From start to finish. So the blueprint is that piece of poster board on the wall or your I say put it on poster board because it can go on your wall where you write. If you put it on a whiteboard and it gets erased, or you put it on a computer, or you put it in a written format, which of course we do that written as well, out of sight, out of mind. And as you're writing those chapters, it's going to be really important that you refer back to your blueprint, right? Because our blueprint is our guide on getting from one thing to the next thing. Okay, so we've spent our time getting all of our chapters lined out. They make sense to us now, right? Okay, chapter 1, we're going to talk about this, and it makes sense to roll into this. Within each chapter we have, remember, our topic, our subtopic, and our stories, anecdotes, whatever you want to use as your glue, and they're all in an order that makes sense. This is your opportunity to step back and say, okay, is there something that I've forgotten? Is there something I need to add to it? This is my blueprint. This is going to create my book. Does this make sense to my reader? So what do I mean by that? Well, there's a journey that happens for every reader. Regardless of the book, that kind of book that you're reading, there's a journey that you take. In the beginning, we are captured as readers by the story. We're captured by the topic, the content. And then as we move through it, it builds on itself. Some books are written chronologically. So, I was a baby, not that this is a fiction series, but I was a baby, then I became a child, then I became a teen, and right? There's a chronological order to it. And sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it's not at all by chronological order. Sometimes it's thematic. So there's a theme, but we still have a starting point that captures our attention, and then the writer pulls us through the process of the different pieces within the theme. Sometimes it's topic related. So we still are going to pull our reader in, or a reader in. As a reader ourselves, we get pulled in, and then they pull us through the topics in a way that makes sense, in a way that builds on the previous. The topics are a little bit different, and depending on what you're going to do with this book, remember this is a tool, depending what you're going to do with it, you might decide, I would like each of my chapters to stand alone so that someone can pick up my book and flip to a specific topic or chapter and be able to consume just that content and it's relevant for their needs. That's awesome. And I love to work on books like that, but we still start out in the beginning by capturing them, getting their attention because they're going to usually start there first anyway. Okay, so we have a blueprint on our wall. Our blueprint, of course, is just our outline that becomes our step-by-step guide for writing our book. It's just like when we're building a wall, just like if we're building a house, that blueprint is going to show us where to start, where to go, and where to finish. Building the foundation, building the walls, and then capping it off with that capstone or that roof, if you will. So the process is the same when you're writing a book. Okay, of course I have a savvy tweet for you. Hop on over to Clara Rose Chat on Twitter and say hello to me. So here's your savvy tweet. You wouldn't take a trip without using a map. Why would you write a book without a blueprint or an outline? It makes sense, doesn't it? So I find that this is a concept that sometimes escapes people. But here's the reason, herein lies the reason that people will work on their book for 10 years. Here's a good example. So I had a lady who contacted me a couple years ago and said, okay, I have my book written. I've been working on it for about 10 years. And I can't finish. So it's mostly written. I'm going to say it's 80 or 90% written. I'm like, okay, let's sit down and have a look at it. So we actually did the entire brainstorm and blueprint process together. We analyzed, we brainstormed, and we blueprinted her ideas with the book written sitting aside, or mostly written sitting aside. When she was done with the brainstorming blueprint, she actually said, I'm just going to toss this and start over. I'm like, okay, don't throw it out just yet, because there's lots of gold in there. Right? There's lots of good nuggets in that book. We just need to pull them out and put them in the appropriate place. So what she had found when she was writing is she'd have an idea and she'd sit down at her keyboard and clunk it out. It was good stuff. She had good stuff to say. And I encouraged her to use some of those amazing things. But what she found was that the order didn't make sense like the order of the brainstorm and blueprint did make sense for her reader. So she ended up writing that whole new outline, that whole new blueprint, if you will, and pulling pieces from the pre-written manuscript she'd already written into the appropriate chapters. So she's like, oh, this is awesome because I've spent 10 years writing this content, right? When thoughts came to her writing this down. So she had done like the longest brainstorm in history. Maybe not, maybe there's longer, but 10 years worth of brainstorming. Every time an idea popped into her head, she's like, this is going in my book, this is gold. And she'd write it down. So that was awesome. So the actual writing of the book went very quickly, more quickly than most, because she didn't have to create her content from scratch. When we started with chapter 1, because that's where we start, blueprint first, start with chapter 1, she had pulled other nuggets, other pieces, other writings from that 10-year brainstorm and plopped it into chapter 1. So then it was just a matter of looking at it and saying, what else do I need to say in chapter 1? Right? Here's my main topic. Here's my subtopic. Here's my story or anecdote, my glue that's going to hold that chapter together. And then she was able to pile on so that that chapter was beefier, but also made sense. Now, her brainstorm and blueprint poster, she kept it on the wall near her writing station where she was going to write, so that she could look at what she's typing, writing, and then look over at her brainstorm and blueprint on the wall and say, am I on topic? Am I sticking to what I said I was going to say in this chapter? We've already created a plan. There's no need to deviate from the plan. Follow the script, right? Follow the blueprint. If you're going to build the brick wall, follow the blueprint. If you're going to build the house, follow the blueprint. If you're going to write your book, follow the blueprint. So as she wrote chapter 1, it was easy to say, okay, I have 2,000 words for chapter 1, which is completely sufficient. And then she could send it over to me. And I could developmentally edit and say, okay, yes, I'm checking her outline that we created together because I have it in paper form, right? I have it written down. I'm checking it to see, did she stay on task? Yes, she did. Did she use the anecdotes? Oh, look, she came up with a couple more stories. This is awesome. So it was that ability to keep her accountable that was so important. So then we could work through our chapters one at a time. Voila, when we're done, we have a book that makes sense, that followed an outline or plan, and became the tool that she wanted this tool to be. Doesn't that make perfect sense? Okay, we're almost out of time together, but I'm going to do a very quick recap for you. We're going to start by analyzing. Figure out what it is you're going to do with this book. Analyze that concept. And then we're going to brainstorm. Get it all out of your head onto paper. We can actually do something with it. And then finally, we're going to create a blueprint, something that we can follow from start to finish that keeps us on task and on point so that we're saying what we want to say and our book is ending up being what we want it to be. I am out of time, but I encourage you to get started on your book, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much. If you're ready to take your influence to the next level, I invite you to download our free app, The Savvy Author. There you're going to find everything that you need to know about becoming a savvy author. Whether you're a first-time author or you're an author again, we would love to be a part of your journey.